Welcome to Fighting Bullies with Bill Reid.
Welcome to Fighting Bullies with Bill Reid. Bill is the senior founding partner at Reid Collins and the author of Fighting Bullies, where he challenges what law students and young lawyers are told about prestige, career paths, and success in the legal profession. Drawing on decades of experience trying high-stakes cases, Bill makes the case for a different path. I'm Lisa Mosby, your host, and today we're talking about the BigLaw prestige trap and what many students don't see coming. Welcome back, Bill.
Thank you for having me.
You know, Bill, BigLaw is often treated as the default definition of success in law school. How did that perception become so dominant?
I think a lot of it has to do with starting salary. But I mean, when you look at on-campus interviews and you realize that there isn't an entire panoply of legal avenues available in that process, and all you see is big dollar signs and starting salaries and names you've heard of because you keep hearing them at law school campuses, at coffee hours and happy hours and whatever other hours they can come up with because they literally start the day you show up at law school, then that then kind of ingrains you in, oh, I've heard of this firm or that firm. But the reality is, and I think this is so interesting, can you name me a single Hollywood movie, book, or anything about the law that you've ever read or seen in your life in which a civil defense lawyer was the hero of the book, the movie, whatever? Because there isn't
Yeah.
one. They're never the hero. But there are movies about plaintiffs' lawyers, and there are even movies about paralegals like Aaron Brockovich. There are movies about criminal defense lawyers like Atticus Finch being perhaps one of the most famous, if not the most famous, um, characters in any kind of legal novel, movie, play, what have you. But the reality is that the perception of law students needs to change, which is why, or I think the reality is different than what law school students see. And I'm trying to change their perception to at least give them a more balanced view so that they can make better decisions for themselves.
And Bill, you describe BigLaw as a machine built around the billable hour. How does that incentive structure shape what young associates actually spend their time doing?
Can you think of a business, any business since the history of time, in which the business is more profitable, generates greater profits, more revenue, is more successful generally by being even more inefficient, other than the hourly fee service professional? In other words, if I'm the big firm partner and I have something that requires 5 people to really do, but I put 20 people on that mission and they all bill prodigiously, which is what they do at Big Law. And now I turn out a bill 4 times the size of what it should be. I make more money. Okay. I make more money personally. My firm makes more money. Everybody does better except for the poor hapless client. Okay. So the bottom line with it is the incentives are all wrong in an hourly fee service model because the incentives encourage inefficiency. And so, in that sense, as AI becomes more and more of a thing, and this whole notion of boiling the ocean or sending 20 people to do the 5 person mission, it ends, so too will the miserable experience of associates. But to answer your question precisely, most senior lawyers could give no, like, they don't care one iota what their young people are doing as long as they're billing. They could be searching on eBay for the next pair of discounted stereo equipment 8 hours a day. As long as they bill their 8 hours, that senior partner is perfectly happy. But to be honest with you, like, I don't think it's that nefarious. I think it's just young lawyers are drafting and redrafting things that have been drafted thousands of times before, wasting their time, and essentially encouraged to do nothing else other than bill hours, rather than actually winning the case or coming up with great ideas or thinking an independent thought that might translate to something they would do. And as you can see, that is really demoralizing. And then you wonder why lawyers hate their profession. most lawyers are depressed, probably some form of substance abuse in relation to any other jobs, higher suicide rates, divorce rates, sleeplessness, all the rest. And I think that the underlying cause of that is at its worst at the big law associate level. They have the least autonomy and experience, the least responsibility, and the most pressure to bill. That is like the worst possible option to start your career if you want to continue in the career.
And there's kind of a general overall belief that if someone works hard enough for long enough, the payoff will justify the grind. What does that promise really look like in the law practice?
Well, I think hard work can pay off if you're on the right track and you're getting the right experience. Like, go back to my example. Say you work your butt off for 2 or 3 years at whatever job is going to get you trial experience, even in the most unglamorous, unsophisticated, lousy cases. And I did landlord tenant stuff as a baby lawyer, so I could speak to that. And then as a baby prosecutor, I got some of the dog cases in my office, ones that probably should have been charged to begin with. So at the end of the day, you got to cut your teeth somewhere. You got to walk before you can run. But if what you're doing is essentially menial, task oriented labor, the only purpose of which is to bill hours that you can make a client pay for. And look, I'm sure you could get a big law lawyer to come on here and say, oh, that guy's crazy. We give our young people real experience. They work on real cases. Look, there's exceptions to every rule. And I am sure that there are some firms out there that are big firm by nature and really try and give their young people some meaningful experience. But I don't think that's true of the vast majority. And so the work hard and you will succeed plan works if you're working at something that will enable you to acquire greater and greater experience such that you can one day do it all and be a trial lawyer. Like, think about this. If you or your family member needed brain surgery and you walked into the hospital and met the brain surgeon and he or she said to you, yeah, this is going to be my first rodeo. I went to Stanford, and after that, I did a fellowship at Harvard. And then I went and did a Rhodes Scholar deal at Oxford, and I've studied brains like you can't believe. This is going to be my first rodeo, though. I'm confident it's going to go well. What are you going to do? You're going to walk out of there. You're going to be like, no way, dude. You're not operating on my brain. That is the big law associate with the fancy pedigree and all the resume that has zero experience. They have nothing to trade on. So they can work as hard as they want. They're not going to get anywhere.
Well said. I am crystal clear on that position now. You tell a story of Abby, someone who entered big law with high expectations and ultimately left the profession entirely. What does her experience reveal about how the system functions?
Well, I think the one thing that her school did to her is they encouraged Abby to go to on campus interviews and encouraged her to try big law. Two things that I think are, well, so first of all, if the law school, its goal is to educate, then wouldn't you think that the law school should approach this in an unbiased way and say, Abby, you say you want to be an environmental lawyer. Do you realize if you go to big law, you're going to be defending the very same polluters that you would like to hold accountable? Have you considered looking at a boutique that might do that rather than go into big law? They didn't say any of that to her. They said, go to on campus interviews and sort it out. Why? Because all they care about is employing their graduate. They don't care if their graduate is happy. No one keeps stats of what students do 5 or 10 or 15 years down the line. Think about this. If we were talking about professional athletes, who really cares what the starting salary is of a private or like any sort of famous athlete? Nobody cares. It's what is your ultimate success and earning power and reward. And more personally, for an individual lawyer, I like to frame the question this way. Imagine you're sitting on your proverbial rocking chair. No one does that anymore, but you understand the concept, right? You're now old and decrepit like me, and now you're reflecting on what you did with 60 or 80,000 hours of your life throughout your career. Are you going to be really proud of the fact that you defended corporate assholes that basically do bad things and then try to avoid the economic consequences of them? Or would you be more satisfied holding those same people accountable and making money while doing it? So to me, Those questions lead to obvious and easy answers. The only problem is no one in law school is asking those questions. And that's why I spent 2 years writing this book.
And not only who you're defending, but then let's get into the burnout. At large firms, it's often framed as an unfortunate byproduct of high performance. You argue it's more structural than accidental. What do you mean by that?
Spending those 60 to 80,000 hours or even just 2,000 hours or more a year as a young lawyer with really no purpose and no responsibility can be demoralizing. I've said it before, just in
Mhm.
talking to you. And that is the real life of a young uh, associate. I mean, these classes start with over 100 lawyers and dwindle rapidly to the point where only a handful of that class of 100 ever makes partner at a big law firm. So think about that. They're basically waiting at the end of this process to see who will, quote unquote, rise through the ranks. And I'm here to tell you, having sat on the other side of the courtroom from some of these people, they're not learning a whole lot. Okay, that's all I got to tell
Yeah.
you.
We've made several references about students carrying big debt, and Big Law is really appealing about that. And it can be the safest financial choice. But how should someone weigh that short term salary and getting those debts paid for against the long term autonomy of fulfillment?
So I would say this historically that safest choice argument has been present. Particularly my firm's now going into its we're in our 17th year, but 10 or 15 years ago, this was a risky prop. Like, these morons, they may not be in business in a year. There were risks that our firm wouldn't survive, and many other small plaintiff shops probably fall in the same boat. Okay. But think about this. We're here in the year 2026. Last year we had Chat GPT-4. This year we have Chat GPT-5. So fast forward the tape. We're now in the year 2031, 5 years from now. So if you're a young law student or you've just graduated or you're thinking of going to law school, you will be in the workforce then or have been in the workforce then. What do you think is going to happen to all of these jobs at Big Law in the next 5 years? There will remain jobs in Big Law, and Big Law will remain. It will just be a leaner and meaner form of Big Law. What does that mean? That means that unless you get ahead of this curve, you are going to be caught with no experience. You'll be expendable, and Big Law will get rid of you the moment it is more profitable for them to do so. When will that occur? That will occur, in my humble opinion, when the hourly fee model breaks down, when clients are no longer willing to pay teams of lawyers to do what artificial intelligence can do in minutes. Will lawyers still be involved? Absolutely. Will the rainmakers who have the clients still be involved and still have clients? Yes, they will. But when they realize that they don't have to deal with 85 people who have personal issues and holidays and sickness and other hassles, and they can make the same revenue on some alternative to hourly fees, that is the moment in time that Big Law transitions to what every other business that's ever existed on, which is efficiency is more profitable. What does that mean? Fewer associates. You don't want to be an associate in 2031 with no skills other than the ones that AI can do better than you. At that point, you will be expendable, and the supposed safe haven of Big Law will be revealed for the true risk that it has today. And I think that's coming. I mean, you're seeing it in so many industries. To assume it's going to leave law unaffected and that these law schools can continue to graduate 40,000 lawyers a year at the second highest number since 2005, it's a dream. It's going to change, and you need to get ahead of it, which is why I wrote my book.
I want to wrap this Big Law episode up with a final question, having you all tie it all together. If a law student is evaluating a career path right now, what are they most likely underestimating about the Big Law track, and what advice do you want to leave them with today?
Well, I think the Big Law track has the promise of safety and prestige. It has neither. I think that I would emphasize gaining experience over salary and ultimately that will pay enormous dividends to you. And I think it will help you avoid the artificial intelligence world we're about to enter. And there are no promises. There might be still a lot of people who get this right and still find themselves in trouble in 2031. They're going to need the need for the number of lawyers we have is going down. It is. So get ahead of it now, or I don't know where you'll end up.
Great wrap up. Thank you for your insights today. Folks, that's it for today's episode of Fighting Bullies. If you're a law student or early career lawyer trying to make smart decisions about your path, you can learn more about Bill's book at fightingbulliesbook.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to like, leave a review, and subscribe to the show. You don't want to miss the next episode. We'll see you there.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.